one thing I found interesting when I was reading up about the making of Lagoon is that it was recorded in multiple cities. You
Yeah.
had Memphis, you had Brooklyn, you had Nashville. So first off, does the location to you, does the location influence the feel of a song?
I didn't think it would so much until listening back to like the collected works here, and you really can sense the individual rooms and players and vibes. Like the first stuff I did was in Nashville with Pat Sansone, and one of the first things we did was call in a pedal steel player, like you do in Nashville.
Yeah.
Those songs have a lot of that, a little bit of that country weepiness to them. And then the stuff we did in Memphis, we did in the home of Big Star at Ardent. So
Yeah.
it's got that feel and that sound. And um, I don't know that the Brooklyn stuff has a specific feel other than, just it's just guys, some Brooklyn guys. It's just at home
Yeah.
and everything. But yeah, I guess it kind of does. At least to me, I mean, because I know when I'm listening to it, I'm hearing all the things that went into it, and it feels kind of like a travelogue to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I work with various bands. One of the bands I work with is Huey Lewis and the News, and a few years back they recorded this album called Soulsville of all these kind of deep soul covers and stuff for the most part. And they specifically flew out to Ardent Studios
Yeah,
in Memphis because they're like, we need the vibe, we need the atmosphere of it all. And
yeah,
so and then I read how you were influenced by a big star and having him available to do drums on it, and it's you just always wonder, it's like, okay, does that put yourself in a whole different headspace once they start rolling tape?
I mean, especially there, the other studios, it was collections of musicians that wasn't necessarily, as familiar with, or in some case, session players. But that particular session was, it was Pat, who I'd been working with, and he's, the guy, he's from Wilco, and I've been a fan of Wilco for 25 years or whatever, and John Davis from Super Drag, who I've been friends with for a long time, and that's one of my favorite bands of the '90s,
Mm,
and Jody Stevens from Big Star, like
yeah.
it's just it was an incredible time to just be in that space with those people making my songs with
Yeah.
poof. Yeah.
And then in the press materials for this album, it said that you had really compiled like 20 songs that you were, but then you chose 12. And so first off, I'm wondering, what was it about those 12 that, that they made the cut over the other songs?
Well, 20 might be conservative too. There's probably more than that are just
No.
in various stages. I knew what this record was going to be basically for a couple years. Since we started it the spring of 2019, so not too long after the first record came out. And in during in that time period, I was going through a divorce, and there was a lot of songs coming from that. So I knew that that was going to be a big component of it. And then there was some other songs that just felt like they sat with those pretty well. But the compiling material and stockpiling was just a thing I had to do because I had a lot of stuff backed up. Uh, and a couple songs along the way kind of like surprised me. Well, like, oh, that has to go on. But like Sleeper Agent was a late surprise. That was the first song on the record because it was, I thought the record was basically done, and then there was this other thing all of a sudden, and it sort of reshaped it. So I let it sort of grow as it went. In that way, the pandemic was kind of a bonus because it might have been a little more of a straightforward, I don't know if it would have been more of a power pop record, but it might have been if it had come out a couple of years earlier. But
Yeah, well, you mentioned Sleeper Agent, which you, as of this recording, just released as the second single. And one thing, I found this quote where you said, "This is the song that made Lagoon feel like a real album."
yeah,
So, which is a lot to say about a particular tune, especially one that appeared so late in the process. So, how did Sleeper Agent have that much influence over this album?
It may just be a matter of it having been like I hadn't written a song. Like since the pandemic started, I hadn't written a song, and I was just walking around. Was trying to figure out the bridge to another song, but I hadn't written a new song in months and months and months. And then this melody and some lyrics just sort of started coming while I was walking around at night. On one of my 4 mile nightly peacekeeping walks.
Yeah.
Like don't lose your brain. Oh, come on. But yeah, and that's a song about trying to hold it together, basically. So
Hmm.
um, it felt like it sort of summed up the two other major topics that were going on in the record and sort of brought them together in a way that made it feel like a statement rather than just a bunch of songs.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know, and I love when I hear stories about that, like something comes along so late in the process, and yet it all kind of ties it together. And it was, and it makes me wonder about the whole idea that your brain gets in a certain space, and then it just, even when you've stopped physically working on the album, it's your subconscious almost is kind of working on it. And I'm wondering if that's kind of part of what brought this song into being.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it wasn't intentional. It just sort of was. It just sort of manifested itself.
Hmm.
It needed to happen. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It was just a one of those sort of bolts from the blue that was like, this is you got to go after this one.
Yeah. And and you mentioned the whole thing with the pandemic, and how um that kind of put a halt to your writing process. And you said there just wasn't anything to write about, and it was a good 6 months before a song finally came. And it was finally, you said, when you kind of reconnected with the outside world, that you were able to write again. But it's interesting because so much of this material is this internal struggle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how does that work, where you had to be able to reconnect externally to access what's going on internally?
It's sort of an interesting conundrum there because yeah, it is a very. I mean, this is the most personal record I've put out, and I've put out a bunch of records now, but this one is like 100%, like it's almost entirely first person. This is me talking about me for sure, not trying to hide behind characters.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess I could have just holed up in a room and written the songs, but it's more of a I kind of need to be doing other things to have the creative things. It's almost like an ADHD thing. Like if I'm doing something, if I'm at work doing another job, like I'll start writing a song, and then
Hmm.
I'll just be like, well, I'm just going to go over there for a few minutes.
Right.
you know, it'll just come then. But if I'm just left to my own devices and staring at the phone for my own devices, haha. Uh, and just staring into space for weeks at a time, like wondering, like, when can I go outside again without wearing without having to avoid people.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of thing where that's all you're thinking about. And yeah, I definitely picked up a guitar every day. I definitely had little bits of things that would come, but nothing really turned into a finished idea for a long time, which is it was probably the longest drought I've had since I've started writing songs
Mm.
in 25 years or something.
Yeah. And I mean, have you, I mean, did that fully release once you, let's say once Sleeper Agent came along and stuff, did that, or did you slide back in and out, in and out?
I wouldn't say it like it wasn't like the floodgates opened. A couple songs came, but they were really good. There's another one that's not on the record that I'm working on with Michael right now.
Mm-hmm.
That was that came from that time. Um, but it did get me more motivated to finish some things that I had sitting around and record them. So like when I were talking about 20 songs or 25 songs or whatever I had, that I was stockpiling, that's just a matter of getting through this backlog of material, and that was always there. So I went to if anything, I maybe finished more things in that time period and made more of the phone calls and emails to get projects started as a result of that downtime, and
Yeah, yeah.
precious, like things don't, you're not going to have to be able to it's not always there, you know what I mean? Like right at the beginning I mentioned this recently on social media, right at the beginning of the pandemic, Adam Schlesinger passed away. He was a friend of mine. I'd known him for a while, but I had just finally gotten to the point where I was like, "Hey, would you like to do something?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course." And we were going to do something that spring, and it never came.
Mm.
So that was a big like kick in the butt to like stop sitting on it. Just
Yeah,
do it.
right. Yeah, because you don't know. All right, it seems like, oh, I've got infinite time and well,
It goes that way.
infinite opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then in terms of some of the writing choices, specifically Machine, which was released as the first single, um, you mentioned that it's about being haunted by someone who's not around anymore, which is, very heavy, kind of thought. However, the song, particularly the chorus, has a very upbeat feel.
Yeah.
And it works really well. And but when you think about it, you're like, it's a heavy song, but it has a light feel. And I'm wondering you know, was that a conscious choice, or was that just the muse whispering in your ear, this is how this is supposed to go?
That's I mean that's the ultimate thing in my writing. I try to I mean that comes from listening to artists like and I think all my favorites do that. Elliott Smith used to do that a lot. That's the one that's going to come to mind is always Elliott Smith, but there's
Hmm.
a lot of other great examples of that where it's the lyrics are dark, but the songs are buoyant and melodic. And in this particular case, it's almost like a kind of dance song. It's got like that vibe,
Yeah.
which was just I think that mostly came of playing it with the people that I played with.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I tried to write it. I tried to write a super drag song, but I also wanted a song that I wrote a song. That song was written for the Ardent sessions, so it was definitely like musically kind of tailored to the guys. But
But yeah, no, because you find, at least for me, I found myself, you would end up singing the chorus, and then, but then, and it's happy, and it's this great earworm thing, but then you realize, oh my God, what am I singing? It's just,
I mean, yeah, but we all go through it, right? We all ruminate over things. We all get stuck on memories, and that's what it's not dark in that it's not exactly about ghosts. It's ghosts with
no,
air quotes with scare quotes around them. Um, it's really about uh, it was about my ex, and just sort of the when you're with somebody for a long time, we were married for more than 10 years, and then all of a sudden it's like we moved on to other things. It's been a while, but there's still those things where you're just like you turn a corner, you go into a certain room, and you're like, oh yeah, this place, right?
right,
So it's those things which it's heavy, but it's not dark to me. It's just life. So
right. I don't know.
but also this record doesn't have a lot of big catchy choruses. The first record had a lot more of that, and it needed that. So
Yeah.
this was the one. This got the call.
Yeah, no, and that is an interesting aspect because going from the first album to this one, it's like, okay, this is way more contemplative, I'm exercising some demons on this one, but again, it's still, it's got the hooks intermixed with it. And it also reminds me, have you ever heard of a song by Elvis Costello called "This Is Hell"?
Oh my God, off of Brutal Youth, yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
same thing, I mean, he's saying about, these awful things, in this world, but
Great to
it's
that. Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's such this happy, and so that's it
Yeah,
made me think of that, you know, where
another
it's
way to
like,
name it,
okay,
but
well, you know, it's and I would, you know, just also say that it speaks to your talent as a songwriter that you can have this, you know, do this Elvis Costello thing where it's happy and catchy and yet you're addressing some darker subject matter.
yeah, he was probably the first he was the first songwriter I think that I heard like him and Michael Penn. And although Michael's stuff isn't quite as dark, but like just those are the guys that like when I first heard them in the late '80s or whatever, I was like, that's what I want to do, you know.
Oh.
But Elvis specifically, yeah, he always would write about these kind of heavy, miserable things with just like these huge Beatles melodies, and you know, he's one of my one of my top three probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Fan.
No, because yeah, it's I don't know, that's the first thing that came to mind with that. Um and then also I would encourage anyone listening to this album to really to like listen to it on with headphones if you ever get a chance, because there, you know, like first time I went through it, you know, car or just, you know, general speakers and that kind of thing. But then you listen to other songs again with headphones, and there's all this little great, I don't know, percussive moments or string moments and stuff that you really tune into. How much of that was your input, and how much of that came from the people you hired for the sessions?
Ear candy, yeah. It's full of it. Yeah, I a lot of that is this is the players. A lot of that is the producers and the players. Um, I made a kind of conscious decision going into this record that I wanted to just kind of be the songwriter, be the singer, and just sort of let the things happen around me and turn more of the control over to the people I was working with. So, um, yeah, a lot of that comes from whoever was in the room, or and the stuff I did with Michael. You know, whoever he decided to call that day. Uh,
Yeah.
Patrick Warren is on three of the songs. All the string stuff is Patrick, and you know I've been going back to Michael Penn's first record, like a fan of his work because he's Patrick Warren's played on. If you're a guy who reads liner notes, he's on so many records,
Yeah.
so many records that you definitely own and love. He's brilliant, and he's sort of the secret weapon on this record. Those three songs that he's on are just gorgeous. The three that we did with Michael. Um, and then yeah, there's a lot of Mellotron. That's a lot. You know, Pat Sansone's a big Mellotron guy, so he laid a lot of that in there, and all the pedal steel stuff. It's just all these like different elements that give it a that make it more than just a rock record, I suppose.
Yeah. And so I would assume then that you're one of these people that like you're very open to additions and suggestions from the people you get for these sessions. You know, you're not like, okay, this is exactly how it's going to go. I mean, it's still this, the structure is still the same, but you seem very open to, yeah, let's, all right, let's try it with that.
Yeah, I definitely grew into that. I mean, when I was younger and making records in the in the early aughts and whatnot, I definitely went in with more of a set idea of what I wanted the song to be, and maybe a list and maybe a little spreadsheet, and would just be like, we got to get this thing and get this thing, and the records were good, but like when I turned to when I made the first record, the first Bird Streets record with Jason Faulkner, that was made entirely in the collaborative spirit. It was like, this is going to be me and him, in a room. He's
Hmm.
producing, but a lot of it is just us tossing ideas back and forth, um, and that appealed to me so much more than just being Mr. Control Freak. And I can do that, and I still do that once in a while, when I'm working at home. But it's just so much more interesting to hear what other people have to offer sometimes, because they might hear the song differently, and hear things that I didn't hear, and
Right.
I want to hear
Like
that.
one example, so the song The Document has what sounds to me like an oboe playing a solo. And I'm like, wow, you do not hear oboes that often in
Yeah.
any kind of pop, folk, rock kind of thing. What drove that choice? It was really
Well,
interesting.
that was I was in the first bunch of sessions we did in Nashville with Pat Sansone producing, and he uh, we cut it with just the bass, the acoustic, and the drums, and then overdubbed the vocals. And then the second day, he called this guy Jim Hoke, who's a pedal steel, excuse me, a pedal steel player primarily, but he's one of those Nashville guys that just doubles on everything. And yeah, he did pedal steel on two songs and went in the other room and played. It's clarinet and bass flute, I believe.
Okay.
And he played
Okay.
both those parts beautifully, and I think knocked that whole like wrote that little bit and knocked it out in I don't know 30 minutes. Just
Oh, wow.
it's just I'm like, what just happened there? This whole just chamber pop song. Um, yeah, I that was Pat's idea and beautifully executed by Jim.
And then another thing that really stood out, especially when you do headphones listening, is the song Ambulance has all these really interesting percussive elements kind of
Yeah.
bouncing around. How did that come about?
That was I did that song here in Brooklyn with Zach Jones and Oscar Rodriguez, and Zach's just a percussion genius, wizard drummer. I mean, he's just all groove. He actually plays with Sting right now, um, which is it's a pretty cool gig for a drummer.
Yeah, yeah,
you
definitely. You know,
that's not everybody gets that way.
no, and it speaks to not only the solo material, but if at some point during that show you're going to be doing Stuart Copeland
A lot of this show, I'm sure. Yeah,
beats, yeah.
yeah,
So that speaks to a certain talent as well.
absolutely. Yeah, that was all his thing. I think that was I can't remember exactly the order of operations there, but we kind of cut the basics all together, and then he just started picking things up and made a little loop basically, and
Hmm.
that's what runs throughout the song and gives it all that energy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a grunge song basically, but that gives it a whole different thing.
Well,
It turns
that's
it turns it from like the Ben's Radiohead song into like maybe a Kid A Amnesiac Radiohead song.
right. What I mean, it's funny you bring that up because that one took me by surprise, particularly toward the end of the song when your vocals go into a whole new area, not on this album. Very aggressive, very harsh, kind of a Chris Cornell
Mm.
style. Um, was that was that again something planned, or was that just a last minute choice where the emotion kind of overtakes the situation?
I think I knew I wanted it to get there. It took we did it a few times, but uh, yeah, once I figured out what it was supposed to be, it was like okay, just scream it. Just scream it in tune, like
Yeah.
all the stuff I grew up on in the early '90s. Like, yeah, Chris Cornell obviously is a huge influence on my singing and writing. Although you don't hear it most of the time. One of my favorite vocalists.
Really? Okay. Yeah, that is surprising.
And and Nirvana, who was probably the thing that got me playing in bands. That was
Hmm.
the spark. So yeah, I don't go there that often, but and I don't go into that register all that often at all. Certainly not on this record, but it felt like it needed to be done uh, to bring it home. Um,
Yeah, no, I mean it works great, and I don't know. It's one of those things. Is that a because it seems like it would be a hell of a strain on anyone's voice to do that for a lengthy amount of time. I don't know. Is it tricky, especially given your normal register to
it's I didn't do too many takes of it,
yeah.
and I haven't had to do it live yet.
Hmm.
So we'll see. Excuse me, but it's not that far off. I mean, I have a broader range than it might show up on records. I just don't sing in that higher register too much because it doesn't. It feels more like a character when I go up there. Uh,
Okay.
but it's there. I've sung some Chris Cornell. Some buddies of mine used to do a tribute every summer after
Oh.
we did it. I think 3 times, and God, it's so much fun to sing that stuff. It's just like I can only do like 4 songs in a set. I have to lay down, but it's really fun to sing that stuff.
Like,
And that's, that line sort of, that a song was originally going to be the end of the record. Originally, the song was going to open with a machine and end with ambulance.
mm,
And ambulance, that line is what triggered the chorus in Machine. This is not a victory. It was like supposed to be this sort of end pins for the record. And then things changed, but it felt like a real sort of pinnacle line for the whole, for the whole process of the record and everything that I was going through and talking about.
yeah, and yeah, it ends on a very, I don't know if upbeat is the correct term, but go free is I don't know. Well, because it makes the record into this kind of journey, and it's
Yeah,
like, okay, finally come out the other end, and I wouldn't call it a happy ending, but a
benevolent.
yes,
Yeah,
come to terms with the situation, and
yeah. It felt like I didn't know what to do with that song for a while, and then it was just like, oh, right, this is the logical conclusion of all the self-loathing and crap that is like, you know, in that case, dealing with a breakup, with a divorce. It's like, well, you just eventually you're just like, okay, well, this is we want the best for each other, and
yeah,
it just means that this is what happens, and
right, right,
that's the clearest cut version of it on the record. The other ones I think hint at it a little bit, but there's a lot of this guy in him, and that one
yeah,
is more like, you know be just go be yourself, and we'll sort things out. And the person in question, we're still friends, so
okay, wow, that's impressive.
yeah.
I mean, that's not always possible. Um, oh, someone's having a tough
Fire
time.
engine,
Yeah.
uh, living on one of the noisiest corners in Brooklyn.
Well, it's the first we've heard, and so that's not bad. Um, and then in terms of going through challenges, so I also read from the notes, putting this together, quote, currently 10 years sober from alcohol. Um, you know, well, first, congratulations. That's a tricky thing to do. Secondly, how has sobriety influenced or affected you as a musician, as a songwriter?
Interesting question. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. Because my you know part of some of the songs I on this record, like Burnout,
Yeah.
sober from alcohol, but then like became a huge pothead for many years. I'm
Mm.
kind of out of that phase now a little bit, but it was a long phase. Uh, so like you just find yourself, and that's a lot of what the non-divorcee songs on this record are dealing with, is you find other things to obsess over and to create addictions to. So uh, if anything, I write about that. It's influenced my songwriting in that I've realized that that's a topic, like just the endless cycle versus just I'm drunk is I've got more things going on than just that. Uh,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's specifically influenced my songwriting, musically or anything like that. That's just still a mystery to me how that all works. So.
Mm.
Uh,
And then was there any trepidation that maybe your artistic abilities were intertwined with that particular obsession and stuff? Just because I think of other people who have either kicked alcohol or drugs, and there was that nervousness about it, or hell, even like Eddie Van Halen, would used to use alcohol to relax himself before he could go on stage, and when he finally pushed that aside, I think he talked about there was that nervousness of like, okay, am I still going to be able to relax, be loose, and
um, hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I convinced myself for a long time when I was still drinking that the drinking somehow helped with the relaxing and the performance. I mean, there's the chemical relaxation part of it, but
Yeah.
I don't think it ever helped with performance. And so yeah, no, I wasn't too worried about that. I mean, I like performing, so yeah, I still get a little nervous sometimes when I do it. Maybe these days because it's so few and far between, but. Um, Yeah, I don't know. I was less worried about that than I was about not coming home some night. So
Yeah.
priorities.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly.
um,
Okay.
yeah,
Um and then and switching gears completely, I found um cover art for this album particularly interesting, and it reminded me of it had like a Roger Dean feel, like all
okay, yes, yeah,
not not quite that way, but there was some element to it that reminded me of all those Yes Asia covers and stuff that he
yeah.
did. What was your input into the creation of the cover?
This painting is by my friend Ada Langford, and she's not even like a professional painter. She just made some paintings, put them up on a site, sold them for. I saw this painting, 6 or 7 years ago, and just loved it and kind of bookmarked it. Um, and then when the record kind of came around and I figured out what the title was going to be, it was just like, oh yeah, that's the thing. I've always wanted to use that as album art. Mainly because I wanted to do a gatefold, like
Uh,
Yes style. It wasn't. I didn't immediately see that connection, but yeah, the more people I showed it to, they're like, it reminds me of a Yes cover. I'm like, yeah,
oh, okay.
perfect. That's perfect. 'Cause it is. It's just sort of abstract and kind of cavernous, and you can kind of like get lost in it. Um, Not quite as surreal necessarily as some of the Roger Dean stuff, but
Right, and not so much science fiction-y as he
right.
used to create, but there's still that kind of, I don't know, the deep colors and the kind of the dripping colors and
Yeah,
so
yeah. I just kind of
um
always the second I saw that painting, I was like, that would look great as album art, and
yeah.
I just waiting to make the album to go with it.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah. All right, well that takes care of all of my questions. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to discuss?
Hmm. I don't know. Uh, that's a great. I don't know. I don't think I have anything
If
else.
there isn't, that's,
We've covered a lot here. You've asked a lot of great questions, and I don't know if I have anything to really add besides, I hope people hear and enjoy this record and find something to relate to in it, and hopefully not too much. But you know,
well, everyone's been through some form of a breakup, and you can identify with that, and
yeah, and I think the timing of it coming, after everything we've been through the last couple of years in everyone's lives, it's there's something for people to latch on to here, and if nothing else, listen to it on headphones and enjoy the ear candy.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I don't have a question about this, but I was really impressed that you actually, in the song Unkind, actually worked the line "the end is nigh" into the lyrics, which I'm like, wow, I've never heard anyone use that line in lyric form before, but it works perfectly here.
When you that was a process of me, a product of me trying to come up with a lot of rhymes,
Oh, okay.
a lot of things that had the I vowel in them, and it was just like that's a good one.
Yeah.
That song came out of that was the one of the last ones actually finished. That was the one I was when I was saying during the pandemic I was walking around trying to find the bridge for this song. That was one of the songs that was super half finished for like 3 years,
Oh, wow.
and I was gonna. It was one of the ones I was gonna take to Adam Schlesinger to try to figure out how to get to the end of it.
Mm.
He passed, and it was like I just, all right, well I got to do this now, and kind of walked around until I figured it out. But um, yeah, it was that one's amazing because Amy Mann plays bass on it, and as I was writing it, I was thinking a lot about how she writes and her rhyming style in her lyrics and stuff, and I feel like I don't wasn't trying to cop her thing, but you know,
No, yeah.
definitely on my mind when I was writing that song, and just amazing that she ended up on the track. So